Let me take a crack at something for all of my high performers, my high achievers, and ambitious people out there. You wake up, you know what needs to happen in your day, and you still don't execute at the level that you know you're capable of. That part alone would be frustrating. What makes it worse is that you're not someone that necessarily lacks discipline. You've probably built some pretty cool things. You've pushed through some pretty hard periods in your career, your business, that would have stopped most other people around you. But somewhere, a gap opened up between what you know you're capable of and what's actually happening. And on a day-to-day basis, you try filling that gap. You've tried the new systems, new habits, different mindset content, reading a few books here or there, different routines. Some of it moves the needle for a while, and then the needle stops moving. So let me tell you what that pattern actually means. You've been trying to fix something that you've never actually measured. And you're not alone, because most people running at your level have never taken a hard look at the 5 performance dimensions that determine whether your system is working for you or working quietly against you in the background. And that is exactly what the CLEAR Diagnostic does. In this video, I'm going to break down that diagnostic that I finally took the time to sit down and build. It consists of 5 dimensions that I see apply to every single one of the entrepreneurs or high performers that I work with. Someone's always being brought down by at least one of them. And in 15 questions and around 4 or 5 minutes of your time, it will help you identify which one of these dimensions is actually creating your ceiling or causing you to plateau. So, before I have you go and take it for yourself, let me break down what exactly each of these 5 dimensions are and what it means if any one of these is falling short. And before I go any further into them, I want to make it clear that this video is for people who are already capable. You know you're capable, you know you're meant for more. You don't need the typical hype up motivation content. You don't need a new morning routine. You don't need all these external productivity tools and hacks. You're in the right place if what you're dealing with is a specific kind of frustration. Consistently high effort, inconsistent output, and no clear explanation as to why this gap keeps showing up for you. Do I have you in the right place? Great. So, what I want you to know first, most people that I work with have never actually taken the time to audit their own performance system. They've maybe tried to optimize the tactics and build some habits and hired some other coaches, but the actual structure underneath how they think, how they decide, how they execute, how they operate, that's never been looked at directly or deeply enough. And this is what's happening for you. You haven't taken the time to realize that all these external things that you're focusing on are totally separate from the root cause of why you're stuck where you're stuck. And it's because you need to identify your underlying layers. When you address a symptom of a problem without locating the source of the problem, you get temporary relief. You'll get a few good weeks. And then that same pattern comes back in a slightly different form. Think about how we even handle our migraines or headaches. You pop Advil right away, and most people, they just go straight to that prescription because that's what we know, that's what we're comfortable with. But the diagnosis gets skipped entirely because nobody really took the time to help them understand why the problem arises and what to do first. So as you're about to see, each of these 5 dimensions are fully geared towards the internal systems and infrastructure of how we operate. Not all the productivity hacks and tools, not the grind set mindset and how to force willpower until you can't anymore. It's how do we get inside and build from the ground up. So the CLEAR Diagnostic, okay, what is it? First of all, CLEAR, 5 dimensions, 5 letters, it's an acronym. The C stands for cognitive clarity. That's how well you process information, how you make your decisions, and how you filter what actually matters on a given day. We have so many things that process through our mind each day. We make over 3,000 decisions every single day, micro decisions. And when this dimension is under strain, decisions that should take 10 minutes might take 10 hours or 3 days or whatever the case is. And you keep reopening things that you've already closed. And that mental bandwidth feels so maxed out even when your workload hasn't even changed. Our brain is wired to hold on to unfinished items. You can look up the Zeigarnik effect that shows that we store information that is not complete. If you never take the time to really understand the way that you operate cognitively, you are going to leak so much energy in directions that you don't even realize. If you look up how many calories your brain alone burns throughout the day, you'd be shocked. So just imagine you're feeling tired, you're not executing at a high level, you feel scattered in so many different directions. Think about how much energy your brain is using, that if it were just clear of all of these unknowns, all of these open loops, if they were closed and you had that energy back to direct fully into the one thing that mattered most to you at the moment, imagine how much more productive you'd be. Imagine how much more fulfilled and how much further along you would be. That is the importance of cognitive clarity. So, going on to the L. The next letter stands for leadership identity. And this is how clearly you know who you are as a leader. And that means a leader of yourself and a leader of others, your peers, your employees, your family, whoever it is. And whether the way that you show up for those people or for yourself is consistent with that identity. Now, the tricky part when it comes to entrepreneurship is a lot of entrepreneurs build their identity in survival mode. They're always scratching and clawing, trying to get to the top. And a lot of times that grind, hustle mentality, it's necessary to get them from 0 to 1, to have that chip on their shoulder to just keep going and know that they'll get there. But past a certain point, operating from that same identity starts to create so much friction with the people around them, with decisions in front of them, and within themselves. Because you don't want to create golden handcuffs. You want to create freedom. That freedom is financial. That freedom is physical. That freedom is mental. To not feel like you're under the weight of the world 24/7. And again, that disconnect between who you believe you are versus the version of yourself that you know you probably need to be in order to get to the place in life that you want, to have the business that you want. Those are entirely different people, but a lot of people don't take the time to realize that where they've gotten themselves to now calls for a new version to get to the next level. Or if they have addressed that, they haven't truly identified what that next level of themselves looks like so they can operate with that identity. And where this leads is a disconnect into the next letter, which is A, action consistency. And this is merely the distance between what you plan and what you execute, what you decide to do versus what you do. And also understanding where that drop-off happens mostly and why it tends to happen at the same types of tasks, same points in the week, same emotional conditions or decisions to make. The patterns are always there, but most people don't know how to take the time to read them and understand them. Now, the beautiful thing about this is our brains are wired to predict patterns. We love patterns. We like familiarity. We like predictability. So imagine how powerful you'd be to be that aware of your own inconsistencies in your patterns so that you can start to predict them and cut them off and redirect. So you're already aware that there's a gap. Let's figure out what they are, predict them, and rewrite new rules to outperform them and start to bridge that gap. And well, I just realized I totally fucked up the spelling, but the letter before the A is the E. And it works out perfectly because this action consistency folds in really well with what the E is, which is your energy architecture. That's about how your entire day is structured around when your mind and body are able to perform. And architecting those energy peaks and valleys with the types of tasks that you perform. Because most people will find themselves scheduling some of their most demanding work around merely their availability, around when the calendar is open enough for them to do said work, or around what feels urgent at any given time, and that's a structural problem. And that work is directly suffering because the state that they're in isn't conducive to be able to support that work. And so imagine what it would be like or feel like to be in tune with your energy rhythms when you know you're the most rejuvenated or the most ready to tackle certain, especially cognitively demanding tasks, which requires a ton of energy, and schedule those tasks around those peaks. The reason I know you've never done this before is because I know that you've sat there during tasks that you know are important, that you know you need to get done, and that you have the space in your calendar for, and you still find yourself there kicking yourself, asking, why can't this just make sense? Why can't I just do this? I don't feel like I have the energy. This can be due to a number of different things, but the energy is there, just not for that task. So how can you find a way, on the fly even, to know when to fill in those gaps or those valleys with other tasks that are more conducive to the amount of energy that you have or the state of mind that you're in? That is about architecting your energy. Physical energy, mental energy, cognitive energy, emotional energy, so many types of energy. And so I may or may not have intentionally, unintentionally fucked up the letter order, because when we talk about energy, that leads us into the last letter, which is R, which stands for recovery intelligence. Recovery intelligence speaks to directly how you recharge, deliberately, not just sleeping or napping, but intentional active recovery. And whether the recovery you're doing is actually restoring capacity, physical, mental, emotional, again, you name it. Or is it just creating the appearance of rest, which usually comes from passive recovery. And this is one of the most underrated dimensions, if not the most underrated dimension for high achievers, not because they don't know that they need to recover, but usually because nobody has shown them what recovery actually looks like for their specific operating system. And another reason it's super underrated is because most high achieving, high performing entrepreneurs, they often run into the trap of mistaking activity for progress or activity for productivity. And tying back into that identity, when you're constantly feeling like you'll lose everything if you stop moving and stop working, you're just gonna find things to do and do and do and do and do. And sometimes that recovery feels too unproductive intuitively, but counterintuitively, it's the most productive thing that you can do, because you're restoring your capacity to have the physical, mental, emotional, cognitive energy to pour into the higher leverage things that actually matter. Those are usually more demanding. So now that I've broken down all 5 of these dimensions in a little bit of depth, I want to see what your scores are, because what these scores do is give you a map, shows you which dimension is carrying the most load for you right now and where the system has the most room to move and improve. And that right there, that's where the work starts. Identify it, understand it. And I'm guessing that you'll likely go into this and you'll score really well across maybe 3 or 4 dimensions. And then you'll see one dimension in a low range and immediately everything will click. You'll know that's the category. Here are all the areas in my life where this is falling short. And over some of my next several videos, I'm gonna go deeper onto each of these 5 dimensions one by one. Now go and find out where you actually stand. Take the CLEAR Diagnostic, it's totally free. The link is in the description. I'm curious if you have any sense of those 5 dimensions, which dimension is your problem area most likely. I want you to drop that dimension in the comments and then come back after the test and let me know if you were right. Like I said, the next videos will be about all these different dimensions, so make sure to come back and check it out. And if this has been worth your time, subscribe. Talk to you in the next one. Peace.